A lake high in the mountains of Pakistan, with an entire village drowned beneath it. A field of white stone in the Andes, 3,000 meters up, that mirrors the surface of the moon. A cliff deep in Arabia, with seashells buried in the rock, far above the sand. A canyon in the oldest desert on Earth, carved by a river that almost never runs. And a wall of red rock, tilted on its end, already old when the first dinosaurs walked. 15 places. Most people will never reach a single one. None of them easy to explain. Beginning with a hillside that looks like it was painted by hand. These hills should not hold these colors. Red, yellow, white, green. Striped across a bare Anatolian steppe, 2 hours west of Ankara. Iron burns the red, limestone the yellow, gypsum the white. The green is raw clay. 10 million years ago, this lay at the bottom of an inland sea. When the water drew back, erosion peeled the old seabed open, one layer at a time. From above, the land ripples in pale mounds, rings stretching outward, a valley of giant fingerprints, veined black where rare rain tears through. The ground lies bare and trackless, and after every rain, the colors shift again. And beneath the chemical moonscape, water. Dead stone and living water in a single frame. The wetland below is a bird sanctuary, where close to 200 species shelter in its reeds. Turkey paints its badlands in mineral pigment. The Sahara guards its gateway in solid stone. No one built them. South of Brezina, where the Saharan atlas breaks apart and the desert begins, flat-topped towers stand scattered across a plain of orange sand. Sheer walls, level crowns, spaced like monuments. But the only architects out here are wind and flood. A whole plateau once covered this ground. The desert took it apart, storm by storm, and carried off everything it could lift, until only these were left standing. They rose from an ancient sea floor when Africa pushed north, crumpling the atlas into being. They mark the exact line where the mountains end and the Sahara takes over. The last high ground before the flat runs for 1,000 kilometers. From above, the isolation is total. Islands of rock in a dry sea. Ridges fan out, cliffs frame cliffs. A new shape at every pass, patterns too clean to look eroded. And the desert still isn't finished. It is taking them apart, grain by grain. Out here, the land is stripped to nothing. But off the western coast, an island built by fire catches the clouds and turns green. Green. Vertical and absolute. Ridges stacked one behind the other, climbing straight up. This is Santo Antão, the northern edge of Cape Verde, an island built entirely by fire, far out in the Atlantic. Its peaks claw the trade winds out of the sky and wring them dry. That water is why these valleys run this steep and this green. And standing in the middle of it, a single dark blade of rock. Xoxô, driven straight through the ridgeline. The eruptions ended millions of years ago. The soft outer slopes washed away, storm and season, century by century. This is the volcanic core that refused to fall. The rock the island couldn't erase. Everything around it leans, folds, and drops away. The needle just stands. A monolith in a hanging garden, sharp enough to cut the clouds that snag on it at dawn. Fire built this and left it green. Far to the west, the same force built something else and left it white and dead. 3,000 meters up, in the high Andes of Argentina, the ground turns white. This is Campo de Piedra Pomez, a field of pumice stone in the Catamarca Desert, so pale and so still, it looks like the surface of another planet. No towns, no roads, no water. At this altitude, the air is thin and the cold is brutal. This entire ocean of stone was born from a single eruption. Cerro Blanco emptied itself across the desert. Molten rock, full of gas, cooled so fast the bubbles froze inside it. That is pumice, a stone light enough to float on water. Then the wind took over. For tens of thousands of years, it has dragged sand and grit across the plain, carving the soft rock into ridges, blades, and frozen waves. A white labyrinth stretching 25 kilometers. The highest of these towers are known as the Giants. Nothing lives here. Nothing grows. The only sound is the wind. But far to the east, the silence breaks. Two rivers run together through the green, and where they join, three countries meet at once. No fence, no wall, no line on the ground. And yet, this is the border of three countries at once. Two rivers do the work. The Iguaçu meets the Paraná in a clean T far out in the heart of South America. Where the water joins, three nations begin. Argentina on one bank, Brazil on another, Paraguay on the third. And the banks are packed. A city on each shore pressed right to the water. Close to 1 million people living within sight of three different flags. One of the most crowded places on Earth where three countries touch. The rivers hold them apart. A single vast bridge ties two of them back together. Brazil to Paraguay. A few minutes from one country into the next. Three countries, two rivers, one view. Far to the north, the ground does something stranger still. It takes its own rock and stands it on end. This red rock was flat once. Level sheets of sand and stone, laid down at the foot of a mountain range that no longer exists. 300 million years ago, the first Rocky Mountains stood here. Then they eroded into nothing. Their sand and iron settled at their feet, hardening into a deep crimson floor. Until a second range rose, today's Rockies, shoving up from underneath that ancient layer. It didn't break, it tilted. A wall of sandstone over 1,000 feet thick, lifted entirely onto its edge, its tips pointing east at the sky. Now these jagged fins cut up through the snow, blood red against white in the dead cold of a Colorado winter. These are the bones of a mountain that died before the dinosaurs ever existed. Pushed upright by the mountains that rose in their place. Here, the earth forced this ridge upright. On the far side of the world, the ground does the opposite. It gives way and lets the water fall. At the top, the water is calm. A shallow creek drifting across a flat sandstone plateau, silent and steady. Then, the ground simply falls away. This is the edge of the Illawarra Escarpment, where an entire tableland breaks off into a sheer wall. Barangari Creek pours straight over the rim. It drops over 100 meters in tiers toward the valley floor. From above, the scale plays tricks. A thin thread of white water plunging until it is swallowed by the green. Mist climbing back up the cliff face, right where the river meets the gorge. Above the edge, the country is dry and exposed. Below lies another world. The spray feeds a pocket of rainforest that shouldn't survive this high, this dry. Here, the water throws itself off the rock, out in the open. Half a world away, in an African desert, it did the exact opposite. It sliced down into the stone and hid. A river carved this. A river that almost never runs. In the heart of the Namib, the oldest desert on Earth. The ground splits open into a slot, barely wide enough to walk through. 30 meters deep. Cut by the Xôxô, a phantom river that flows just a few days a year after rains that may not come at all. The walls are a record. Pebbles, gravel and sand, cemented into solid rock. Soft enough for a rare flood to cut. Hard enough to hold its shape for millions of years. Each layer, the trace of an ancient surge. A history of water written in a place that has almost none. Deep in the shade, the water lingers, cool in the cracks, while the sand above burns past 40 degrees. The first settlers couldn't get their animals down to it So they knotted together 6 ox wagon straps, dropped a bucket, and drew the water up by hand. 6 straps. Sesriem, the name it still carries. Here, the desert hides its only water in a crack in the ground. Far across the Atlantic, in the green hills of Guatemala, people built something bolder. A fortress city, sitting on a tongue of land, ringed by canyons of its own. Until now, nature shaped everything. This was built by human hands, designed to be impossible to take. High in the hills of Guatemala, a Maya kingdom raised a city on a narrow ridge. On every side, deep ravines drop away. Natural moats. No way in. No way to surround it. The Chahoma moved their entire capital here to escape their enemies, raising temples and pyramids of pale volcanic stone. A stronghold built to never fall. It fell, first to a rival Maya power, then in the end to the Spanish, conquered and abandoned. The ravines that guarded it still stand. The city inside them never came back. Here, a kingdom rose and fell in a single century. Far to the north, the earth keeps a much longer record. Millions of years, painted in stripes across the hills. Every band of color here is a different age of the earth. Each stripe a separate slice of time. These are the painted hills of Oregon. Not paint, not stain. Layer after layer of volcanic ash, blown in from eruptions 100 miles away. The oldest layers, 35 million years back. Each one weathered into a different color by the climate of its age. Red, where the world was warm and wet. Black, where plants grew and rotted into the soil. Gold, gray, and tan between them. Each band, a different climate, a different age. Layer by layer, they record the weather of a vanished world. From above, the hills look soft, almost liquid. Smooth folds of color with no hard edges anywhere. A boardwalk runs along the foot of them, thin as a hair against the slopes. Bone-dry clay that turns vivid after rain, then fades again as it dries. Here, the ground runs millions of years deep. On the far side of the world, a mountain came down in a single day and began to drown a valley. Under this water, there is a highway and a village. Both were here before the lake existed. On the 4th of January, 2010, high in the mountains of northern Pakistan, the earth gave way. A massive landslide buried the village of Atabad in seconds. But the destruction wasn't over. The falling rock choked the Hunza River and stopped it dead. With nowhere to go, the water began to rise, slowly, month after month. It swallowed fields, then homes, then the Karakoram highway itself, the only lifeline between Pakistan and China. By summer, an entire valley had been erased. What it left behind is staggeringly beautiful. A 20-kilometer stretch of glacial turquoise walled in by bare rock. In winter, a fragile skin of ice freezes across it. For years, the only way across was by boat. And somewhere in the freezing dark below, the old highway still runs. A violent disaster made this lake. Far to the west, in an Arabian desert, the earth does the exact opposite. It simply ends in a cliff that drops into nothing. There are seashells in this rock. 300 meters up, in the middle of the open desert. This is the place they call the edge of the world. A sheer cliff northwest of Riyadh, where the ground drops away, and the plain below runs flat to the horizon. It stands at the tip of the Tuaik Escarpment, a colossal wall that cuts 800 kilometers across the heart of Arabia. And the seashells are real. Because all of this was once a shallow tropical sea. The cliff is built from it. Layers of ancient seabed, still holding coral and shell, turned to stone and lifted high above the sand. What lifted it was the planet itself. As the Red Sea tore open far to the west, the whole of Arabia tilted and rose. The sea drained away. Wind and water went to work on the bare rock. And over millions of years, they carved a coastline that looks out over an ocean that is no longer there. Here, the edge of the world is the shore of a vanished sea. Far to the north, in the Alps, the land does the reverse. It closes in, into a valley so deep and narrow, the sun barely finds the bottom. Down here, between the cliffs, one sound swallows everything else. Water, plunging straight off the mountain above. This is Foroglio, a handful of stone houses in the Bavona Valley, one of the wildest and steepest in Switzerland. Behind it, a river drops off the cliff. One of the tallest waterfalls in all of Ticino. It pours from a hanging valley, a side branch left high and dry when a great glacier cut the main gorge below it far deeper. Its stream had nowhere to go but over the brink. The village itself is built from the mountain. Houses of grey stone, roofed in the same, packed tight beneath the cliffs. And there are no power lines. No grid has ever touched this place. People have lived this way for 500 years. They come up in spring and head back down before winter, when the light sinks behind the walls and the floor lies in shadow for months. A village that time forgot to change. The modern world never really reached Foroglio. Far across the Atlantic, on a small Caribbean island, it lands every few minutes. 100 tons of screaming metal just over people's heads. A jet airliner wheels down, skimming low over the sand. And right beneath it, a crowd on the beach, looking straight up. This is Maho Beach, on the island of St. Martin. At one end of it sits the runway of Princess Juliana Airport, and only a narrow road separates the tarmac from the shore. So every arriving plane has to come in low, just meters above the fence, and the tourists waiting below. They come in every size: small island hoppers, twin-engine jets, and the big wide bodies inbound from Europe. Each one clears the shoreline by what looks like an arm's reach, then drops onto the runway behind. 50, sometimes 70 of them, day after day. And it works both ways. On takeoff, the engines point back at the crowd. The blast can flatten a grown adult and tear the sand right off the ground. A sign on the chain link warns, in plain words, that it can kill. Thrill seekers line up to hold on anyway. This whole spectacle comes down to one thing. An airport was built at the very edge of the ocean. The last place on the list is the exact reverse. It looks built by hand, tens of thousands of stone columns fitted together like a floor. But nature laid every single one. For centuries, people had one explanation for this place. A giant built it. On the north coast of Northern Ireland, some 40,000 basalt pillars rise out of the ground and step down into the sea. Most of them are near-perfect hexagons, packed so tightly and so evenly that they look carved by hand, like the courtyard of some ancient hall half sunk beneath the waves. But no one built the Giant's Causeway. Around 60 million years ago, the earth tore open and molten rock poured out across the land. As that thick lava cooled, it began to shrink, and shrinking rock cracks, the same way drying mud does. Here they ran straight down and met at even angles, and split the entire mass into columns. The old story said Finn McCool placed these stones, a path across the water to reach a rival. And strangely, it got one thing right. The exact same formations rise out of the surf on the Scottish shore, the far end of the same ancient flow. No giant ever laid a stone here. Just cooling rock, hardening into a shape too perfect to look real. That was the last one. 15 corners of the earth. Most of them missing from the maps. All of them exactly where the cameras left them. And 15 was never the whole list. It was barely the first page. The next one is already on screen. Keep going.